The shocking incident. It was a quiet day on Earth. People went about their daily lives, unaware of the storm brewing in the vast reaches of space. But for Erin Vale, commander of Earth's fleet, nothing was normal. The hum of the command center echoed in her ears as she studied the incoming message from deep space, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. The data was clear. The Galactic Council, the powerful governing body that ruled over much of the galaxy, had been hiding a dark secret. Erin had always believed that the Council was Earth's protector, the ones who had kept the peace for decades. But this message changed everything. It wasn't just a warning. It was proof of a terrible betrayal. As Erin read the message again, her mind raced. The Galactic Council, in its quest for more power, had secretly been working with an alien race known as the Zorath. The Zorath were a ruthless species, known for their destructive power and brutal ways. The Council had promised them control over Earth's resources in exchange for their help in wiping out humanity. Erin's fists clenched in anger. How could they betray humanity like this? Earth had been a loyal member of the Council for so long. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was a plan to eliminate Earth from the galaxy. She couldn't keep this information to herself. The people needed to know. Erin quickly contacted General Marcus Cole, the leader of Earth's military forces. His response was immediate. "Erin, are you sure about this?" Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. "This sounds impossible. The Council has always supported us." "I thought so too," Erin replied, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "But the evidence is clear. The Council has already made its deal with the Zorath. They've promised us to them." There was a long pause before Marcus spoke again. "This changes everything. We need to act fast. We'll call a meeting with the fleet commanders. We need to figure out our next move." Erin agreed and began preparing for the meeting. As she looked out of the command center's window, she saw the fleet of ships parked in orbit around Earth, ready for any mission. They had been preparing for a peacekeeping mission with the Council, not for war. Now, they would be thrust into a battle for survival. When the commanders gathered in the war room, Erin wasted no time in showing them the shocking evidence. The room fell silent as they processed the information. "We've trusted the Council for years," said Commander Elise Richards, her voice filled with disbelief. "How could they do this to us?" "We don't know why," Erin replied. "But we do know one thing. We cannot let this go unchecked. If the Zorath are allowed to attack, Earth will be wiped out." General Cole nodded. "We need to strike before they do. If we wait for the Council to act, it will be too late." Erin turned to her team. "We've spent years trusting the Council, but now we can't afford to trust anyone but ourselves. We must prepare for war. The Zorath won't wait for us to be ready." The tension in the room was thick. The commanders knew what this meant. If they went to war, it would be unlike anything they had ever faced before. The Zorath were known for their ruthless tactics, and if the Council had made a deal with them, there was no telling how far they would go to destroy Earth. "We'll need every ship, every weapon we have," Erin continued. "But we can't just rush in blindly. We need to know where the Zorath are, what their fleet looks like, and how to fight back." The room went quiet as they considered the gravity of the situation. Earth had always been a peaceful planet, and now they were on the verge of an all-out war. There was no turning back. The Council's betrayal had forced their hand. Erin's mind raced with plans and strategies. But one thing was clear. They had no time to waste. "We'll need to send a reconnaissance team to gather more information," said Captain Lyle, one of the fleet's top pilots. "We need to find the Zorath fleet before they find us." Erin nodded. "Get the team ready. We leave at once." As the meeting broke up, Erin felt a weight settle in her chest. Earth had always been a part of the greater galactic community, but now they stood alone. The Galactic Council, the very organization that had promised peace, had just betrayed them, and Earth would have to fight for its survival. But Erin knew this wasn't just about protecting Earth. It was about taking back what had been stolen. The Council had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they would pay the price. As the fleet prepared for its first strike, Erin couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Council might have betrayed them, but humanity had never been a species to give up. The fight for their future had only just begun. Humanity's unlikely weapon. The room was filled with quiet murmurs, each officer trying to digest the enormity of the situation. Earth's survival depended on a race against time, and every second counted. Erin Vale paced back and forth, her mind working at a furious pace as she tried to make sense of everything that had happened. The Galactic Council had betrayed them, and now they had no choice but to strike back. Where do we even begin? General Marcus Cole's voice broke the silence, his gaze focused on the star map projected in the center of the room. The map was filled with distant star systems, each one representing potential threats or allies. But all Erin could think about was the next move. "I don't know," Erin replied, her voice grim. "But we have to act fast. The Zorath are coming, and they're not waiting for us to be ready. We need to be prepared for what's coming." "We can't fight them with just our fleet," said Captain Lyle, who had just returned from his reconnaissance mission. He was breathless, his face pale with worry. "The Zorath have a much larger fleet than we imagined. If we don't have something that can match their power, we're finished." Erin's heart sank. She had been hoping for some miracle, some secret weapon hidden away that could turn the tide of battle, but Captain Lyle's report made it clear: humanity was outmatched. But as the officers discussed their dwindling options, one of Erin's most trusted advisors, Dr. Ilara Madsen, spoke up. "There's something we might have, something that could change the game." The room fell silent, every eye turning to Ilara. Dr. Madsen was known for her brilliance, a scientist who had spent years working on advanced technology, but her words left Erin uneasy. What could be so powerful that it hadn't been revealed until now? "What do you mean?" Erin asked. Dr. Madsen hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm talking about the experimental weapon we've been working on in secret. It's been stored away, forgotten for decades. I was only a part of the project, but I believe it could be the key to turning this fight around." Erin's interest was piqued. "What kind of weapon are you talking about?" Dr. Madsen walked to a nearby console and typed in a series of commands. The walls around them began to glow as an old blueprint appeared on the holographic display. It showed a sleek, imposing ship unlike anything Erin had ever seen before. The ship was massive, with a design that seemed far too advanced for anything humanity had built. "This is the Starbreaker," Ilara explained, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and concern. "It was built during a top-secret project years ago. The idea was to create a ship that could operate without a crew, powered by an artificial intelligence. It was designed to be humanity's ultimate weapon, a force capable of taking on the entire fleet of the Council itself." Erin stared at the ship on the hologram. Why wasn't it used? Why wasn't it completed? "The project was abandoned," Ilara said softly. "The Council didn't want to risk creating something they couldn't control. They believed that a ship like this could be a threat to their rule, so they shut it down before it could be finished." Erin's mind raced. This was exactly what they needed, something that could match the Zorath's overwhelming force. But there was one problem. The ship was incomplete, and no one knew how to activate it. "If we want to use it, we'll have to finish the work ourselves," Erin said, her voice determined. "How long will it take?" Ilara frowned. "It's not just about finishing the ship. The AI that controls it is complicated. It's not like the usual systems we're used to. We'll need time to interface with it, and we don't know if it will even respond." "Time isn't something we have," General Cole replied sharply. "The Zorath could arrive any day now. We can't afford to waste another moment." Erin's eyes locked onto the star map once more. The Zorath fleet was out there, closing in on Earth with every passing hour. But with the Starbreaker, humanity might just stand a chance. Erin didn't hesitate. "Get to work on the AI, Ilara. she commanded. "I want that ship online and ready for battle within the next 48 hours. We'll use whatever resources we have left to finish it." The room was filled with a sense of urgency as the officers scattered, each one preparing for the fight that was rapidly approaching. But Erin stayed behind, staring at the hologram of the Starbreaker. The ship could be the key to Earth's survival, but there were still so many unknowns. Would the AI even recognize humanity as its master? Would it respond to their commands, or would it be another weapon they couldn't control? As the hours ticked by, Erin couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to awaken something powerful and dangerous. The first strike. The tension in the command center was palpable as Erin Vale watched the countdown to the Starbreaker's activation. Time was slipping away, and the Zoreth fleet was closing in faster than anyone had expected. Erin stood by the holographic map, her eyes scanning the stars for any sign of the enemy. Earth had never faced a threat like this before, an alien species allied with the very government they had trusted for decades. "Are we ready?" General Marcus Cole's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone sharp with urgency. Erin turned to face him, trying to hide the anxiety that gnawed at her insides. "We'll be ready. The Starbreaker's eye is operational, but we haven't tested it yet. It could be our only chance." Ilara Madsen, the lead scientist overseeing the activation, was standing by the control panel, her fingers flying across the console. "It's responding, but we don't know if it will follow our commands the way we need it to," she said. "The AI was built to operate independently, but we've managed to integrate it with Earth's fleet network. Still, there's a risk." "There's always a risk," Erin muttered, looking back at the map. "And the Zoreth won't wait for us to figure it out. We launch in 10 minutes. The fleet was ready, but the truth was that Erin had no idea how they would fare against the Zoreth's overwhelming numbers. The Starbreaker was their best hope, but if it failed, they would be on their own. As the ships prepared for launch, Erin's mind raced. She had always been a leader who thrived under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle for victory. It was a fight for survival. If humanity failed here, there would be no second chance. Earth would be erased from the galaxy, a forgotten casualty in a galactic war they had never even known existed. The fleet began its journey toward the edge of Earth's space, where the Zoreth fleet had been detected. The battle would take place in the vast expanse of space, with no cover, no place to hide. The Zoreth were ruthless fighters, and they had a fleet that outnumbered Earth's by more than 3-1. But the Starbreaker, if it worked, could change everything. Erin took her seat in the command chair aboard the flagship, her hand steady as she issued orders. "All ships, prepare for engagement. We'll be approaching the Zoreth fleet in 30 minutes. All shields up and weapons at full power. Stay sharp." The crew moved quickly, their focus unwavering. Every person on that ship knew what was at stake, and they were ready to fight. Suddenly, an alarm sounded. The Zoreth fleet had been spotted. Thousands of ships, dark and menacing, filled the starry void ahead. They moved with an eerie precision, as if they had been waiting for this moment for years. Erin's heart pounded as she stared at the incoming fleet, but she knew there was no turning back now. "Admiral, the Starbreaker is in position," Ilara reported from the comms. "It's ready for deployment." "Good," Erin said, her voice steady despite the fear creeping up her spine. "Launch the Starbreaker." In an instant, the massive Starbreaker ship detached from the fleet, its sleek design cutting through space like a blade. It moved with precision, faster than anything humanity had ever built, its AI-driven engines propelling it toward the heart of the Zoreth fleet. Erin watched the ship on the screen, holding her breath. The Starbreaker was their best weapon, but its true power was still unknown. Would it obey their commands? Would it be able to handle the Zoreth threat? The Starbreaker opened fire. A series of blinding beams of energy erupted from its cannons, hitting the nearest Zoreth ships with deadly accuracy. The explosions were massive, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Zoreth ships returned fire, but the Starbreaker's shields absorbed the blasts effortlessly. "Target their command ship," Eren ordered. The Zorth fleet was large, but if they could destroy the central command ship, they might cripple the entire fleet. The Starbreaker sped toward the Zorth flagship, its weapons firing relentlessly. Eren watched as the Zorth ships attempted to surround the Starbreaker, but it was moving too fast, its AI adapting and outmaneuvering the enemy with ease. The Starbreaker was unstoppable, tearing through the Zorth fleet like a storm. Just as Eren thought victory was within reach, the unthinkable happened. The Starbreaker's energy reserves began to deplete at an alarming rate. Ilara's voice crackled through the comms. "Eren, the Starbreaker is draining power too quickly. The AI is overloading. We need to pull back, or we'll lose it." Eren's heart sank. They had no choice now. The Starbreaker was their last hope. But even it wasn't invincible. "Get all ships to fall back," Eren ordered. "We'll regroup and strike again." But before the fleet could retreat, a massive explosion rocked the Starbreaker. The AI, in its desperation to defend itself, had overused its power, causing a catastrophic overload. The ship was out of control. "Eren, we've lost the Starbreaker," Ilara shouted, panic in her voice. "No," Eren snapped, but it was too late. The Starbreaker spiraled out of control, its weapons still firing randomly into the Zorth fleet, causing chaos and destruction. It was a tragic turn of events, but it had bought the Earth fleet precious time. The Zorth, now confused and disoriented by the unexpected attack, faltered for a moment. Eren saw the opportunity. "Push forward, all ships. Take advantage of the confusion." The Earth fleet surged forward, pressing their advantage, but the loss of the Starbreaker weighed heavily on Eren. The weapon had been their greatest hope, and now they were once again fighting without it. The battle was far from over. The Zorth might have been temporarily disoriented, but they were not defeated, and Earth's fleet had taken significant losses as well. As the battle raged on, Eren knew that they had won a small victory, but the war was far from over. The cost of victory. The battlefield was chaos. The stars around Earth's fleet shimmered with the debris of destroyed ships, and the cold silence of space was broken only by the crackling of communication systems. The Zorth fleet, though shaken by the loss of the Starbreaker, had regrouped. Their ships were fast, relentless, and fiercely determined. But despite their power, the Earth fleet had managed to strike back, buying humanity a brief moment of hope. Eren Vale stood at the center of the command room, her eyes fixed on the star map. The Zorth fleet was still out there, a looming threat that hadn't been fully defeated. Yet, despite the tremendous loss of the Starbreaker, Earth's fleet had managed to hold its ground. The Zorth had been thrown into disarray, but this was far from over. "Admiral, the Zorth fleet is regrouping," General Marcus Cole reported, his voice tense. "They're moving toward Earth's orbit again. They've suffered heavy losses, but they're not retreating." Eren's hands clenched into fists. She had hoped the Starbreaker would have done more to cripple the enemy fleet, but its failure had cost them dearly. And now, the Zorth were determined to finish what they had started. "Prepare the fleet for another attack," Eren said, her voice calm despite the storm of emotions inside her. "We don't have much time. We need to hit them before they reorganize." "We've lost a lot of ships, Eren," Marcus reminded her. "Our forces are stretched thin. We can't afford another engagement like that." Eren looked around the room at the faces of her commanders. She saw the same exhaustion and fear in their eyes that she felt in her heart. The Starbreaker's destruction had sent a shockwave through the fleet. They had been relying on that weapon as their trump card, and now it was gone. But she had no choice. Earth's survival depended on their ability to keep fighting. "We push forward," Eren said firmly. "We can't let them take Earth. Not now." The fleet moved into position once again, its remaining ships forming a tight defensive perimeter around Earth. The Zorath, sensing the resistance, came at them with brutal force. Their ships were larger, more heavily armed, and they showed no mercy. But humanity wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The first shots were fired, blinding beams of energy cutting through the vacuum of space. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as both sides exchanged fire. Erin's heart raced as she watched the chaos unfold, her eyes scanning the status reports of the fleet. "We're holding, but just barely," said Commander Elise Richards, her voice strained. "Our shields are taking a beating, and we're running low on ammunition. We can't keep this up much longer." "Stay focused," Erin commanded. "We need to find their weak point. There's got to be an opening." As the battle raged on, Erin's mind flashed back to the Starbreaker. The ship's eye had been humanity's last hope, but its loss had left a gaping hole in their strategy. Yet, the fleet wasn't entirely without hope. They still had one thing the Zoreth couldn't replicate: humanity's sheer will to survive. "We need to disrupt their command ship," Erin said, her voice steady despite the pressure mounting around her. "That's where their strength lies. Take out their leader, and the rest of the fleet will crumble." The fleet's remaining ships, battered but resolute, adjusted their course. The Zoreth flagship was a massive fortress of metal and firepower, but if Earth's fleet could destroy it, the battle might turn in their favor. But as they closed in on their target, something unexpected happened. A sudden surge of energy blasted through the fleet, hitting the lid ship with terrifying force. It wasn't the Zoreth. It was something new, something far worse. "Erin." Alara Madsen's voice came through the comms, frantic. "You need to see this. There's a new ship. It's massive. It's coming from the Zoreth fleet, and it's unlike anything we've ever seen." Erin's stomach dropped as she looked to the sky. A massive silhouette appeared on the edge of the battlefield, its dark form blocking out the stars. The ship was enormous, dwarfing even the largest ships in the Zoreth fleet. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. "What is it?" Erin whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a dreadnought," General Cole said grimly. "A ship designed for total destruction. If the Zoreth have that, we're in serious trouble." The new ship unleashed a barrage of energy that ripped through Earth's remaining ships. One by one, the fleet's vessels were struck down, the once proud ships of Earth's military reduced to smoldering wrecks. Erin's heart raced as she watched the devastation unfold. "We can't hold them off," Commander Richards said, her voice shaking. "We need to retreat. There's no way we can win this." "No," Erin said firmly. "We don't retreat. Not while Earth's fate is on the line." With their forces dwindling, Earth's fleet continued to fight. But the battle was slipping out of their hands. The dreadnought was too powerful, its weapons tearing through everything in its path. Erin knew that they couldn't last much longer. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a voice came through the comms, a voice Erin hadn't expected to hear. "This is Captain Lyle," came the calm, determined voice of the fleet's top pilot. "We've got one last shot at this. I'm going after their command ship. If I don't make it back, someone has to finish the job." Erin felt a chill run down her spine. "Lyle, don't be foolish. You can't take on that ship alone." "I don't have a choice," he replied. "The fleet's going down anyway. This is our only chance to end this. I'll make sure it counts." Erin clenched her fists. She couldn't let Lyle sacrifice himself, but there was no stopping him. He had already made up his mind. The only thing she could do now was trust that he would do whatever it took. As Captain Lyle's ship dove toward the Zoreth command ship, Erin watched in silence, her heart heavy with the knowledge that this battle had cost them so much. But even in the face of certain defeat, humanity had shown its strength. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to take back what had been stolen from them. The final confrontation was drawing near. The cost of victory had already been high, and the price was about to rise even further. The final gamble. The cold emptiness of space felt more oppressive than ever as Erin Vale watched Captain Lyle's small fighter ship dart toward the massive Zorath command ship. His last words still echoed in her mind. "This is our only chance to end this." The rest of Earth's fleet, battered and nearly broken, fought desperately against the overwhelming force of the Zorath, but the appearance of their dreadnought had thrown everything into chaos. Now, with their forces dwindling, it was up to Lyle to make one final push. Erin gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles white. "Lyle, you better make it count," she whispered to herself. Around her, the command center was silent, each officer working furiously to hold their ground. The battle raged outside, but inside the flagship, there was no more time for hesitation. They were fighting for more than just victory. They were fighting for their future. Captain Lyle's voice crackled over the comms. "Admiral, I'm heading for the command ship's weak point. I'll need a distraction to make it through." Erin's eyes darted to the star map. The Zorath command ship was surrounded by a cloud of smaller vessels, their weapons firing with deadly precision. They would tear Lyle apart before he ever got close, unless they could create an opening. "General Cole," Erin said, her voice cutting through the tense air, "we need a full-scale diversion. Use everything we have left." Cole nodded sharply, his expression grim. "Understood, Admiral. We'll pull their attention away from Lyle, but we don't have much firepower left to hold them off." "We don't need firepower," Erin said, her voice suddenly fierce. "We need time, long enough for Lyle to strike." The fleet's remaining ships moved into formation, creating a wall of defense between the Zorath ships and Lyle's fighter. Lasers and missiles flew, illuminating the void as the ships engaged in a desperate dance of destruction. The Zorath forces responded in kind, but Earth's ships fought like cornered animals, ferocious, determined, and unwilling to give up. As the battle raged, Captain Lyle's fighter weaved through the chaos, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. He was close now, just a few clicks away from the Zorath command ship. He could see the massive dreadnought looming ahead, its dark shape blocking out the stars. Its weapons were still firing, cutting through Earth's remaining ships like a scythe through wheat. If they didn't act now, it would be the end. Erin's heart pounded as she monitored his progress. She knew the risk he was taking. The Zorath command ship was surrounded by layers of defenses, and Lyle was flying solo. It was a suicide mission, but there was no choice. The fate of humanity depended on this last gamble. Lyle's voice came through again, strained but focused. "I'm in position, preparing to fire on their weak point. Now." The comms went silent for a split second. Then, a violent explosion rocked the Zorath flagship. The command ship's outer hull cracked, and sparks erupted from the breach. Erin's eyes widened in disbelief. Lyle had done it. He had found the weakness, and now the Zorath were exposed. But the victory was short-lived. The Zorath quickly retaliated, unleashing a barrage of firepower that struck Lyle's fighter. Erin's heart dropped as she watched the small ship spiral out of control. The explosion that followed was deafening, and for a moment, it felt like the entire fleet had stopped breathing. "Lyle," Erin shouted, her voice filled with panic. "Report." "Lyle, respond." There was no answer, only static. For a moment, everything felt still. The battle outside, the firing of weapons, the desperate shouts of officers. All of it faded into the background as Erin stared at the screen in horror. She had lost him. They had lost him. The pilot who had risked everything to give them a chance. But then, to her surprise, a voice broke through the static. "This is Captain Lyle. I'm still here." His voice was weak, but it was unmistakably alive. Erin's heart leaked with relief. "Lyle, where are you? What's your status?" "I hit the weak point," Lyle said, his voice crackling with exhaustion. "But they're coming for me. I've got about 2 minutes before they catch up. You need to finish this." Erin's mind raced. The Zorath were closing in fast, and Lyle's fighter was heavily damaged. There was no time for hesitation. She glanced at the star map again, her eyes locking on the Zoreth command ship. "We're going in," she said, her voice cold with determination. "All ships, follow me." The remaining Earth fleet, though battered and low on ammunition, turned toward the Zoreth command ship. Their mission was clear: finish what Lyle had started. As they closed in, they fired everything they had left. Lasers, missiles, anything that could do damage. The Zoreth flagship was already weakened, and now they had one final chance to bring it down. Firing on their engines, General Cole shouted from his station. The energy from the fleet's remaining weapons hit the Zoreth flagship with stunning force. Massive explosions rocked the ship, and for a brief moment, it seemed like the command ship would collapse under the weight of its own damage. But the Zoreth weren't done yet. They fired back, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. One by one, Earth's ships took hits. Erin's flagship was struck, its shields flickering as the blasts rang out. They had to push forward. There was no turning back now. The Zoreth flagship was just a few moments away from total destruction when Erin's voice cut through the chaos. "All ships, fall back. We've done enough. We've won." The Zoreth flagship erupted in a final deafening explosion as the Earth fleet turned to retreat. The Zoreth fleet, unable to recover from the destruction of their command ship, began to scatter. The fight was over. Erin's hands were shaking as she stared at the remnants of the Zoreth fleet on the star map. They had won, against all odds. But the victory came at a steep price. Many ships were lost, and they had almost lost their best pilot, Captain Lyle. Erin didn't know how many more battles Earth could endure, but for now, humanity had held its ground. As the fleet began its journey back to Earth, Erin couldn't help but feel a sense of sorrow for the cost of this victory. The Zoreth had been defeated, but the war wasn't over. Humanity's fight for survival had only just begun. The unforeseen consequences. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Earth's fleet had destroyed the Zoreth command ship, and the remaining forces of the Zoreth had begun to retreat, scattering into the void of space. The silence that followed felt almost as heavy as the battle itself, a moment of calm after the storm. But for Erin Vale and the crew of the Earth fleet, this peace was only temporary. As Earth's fleet limped back toward the safety of their home world, the cost of the conflict weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. The once proud ships of humanity's military were battered and broken. The lives of many had been lost in the fight for survival. And yet the greater question still lingered in the air. What would come next? Erin stood in the command center of the flagship, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. The destruction of the Zoreth command ship was a monumental victory, but something gnawed at her, a feeling she couldn't quite shake. The Zoreth were powerful, but there had been something else. A presence, something that had been watching them from the shadows. The dreadnought they had faced in the last battle had been unlike anything they had seen before. It was almost as if the Zoreth were not acting alone. "Admiral," General Marcus Cole's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've received a transmission from Earth. It's urgent." Erin turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Put it through." The screen in front of her flickered, and soon a face appeared, a familiar one. It was Ambassador Kira, the lead negotiator between Earth and the Galactic Council. Her face was grim, her expression troubled. "Admiral Vale," she began, "we've just received troubling news. The Galactic Council has decided to take a more active role in this conflict. They're sending reinforcements. But there's a catch. They're not here to help us. They're here to control us." Erin's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean by control?" "The Council has decided that humanity is a threat to galactic stability. They've recognized our military strength and our potential. They fear that we might become a new power in the galaxy, and they're not willing to allow that," Kiera said, her voice tight with frustration. "So, they're sending reinforcements to stop us?" Erin asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. "Exactly," Kiera confirmed. "They're afraid of what we might become." They've decided that humanity's power needs to be contained. Erin's blood ran cold. This was the last thing she had expected. The Galactic Council, which had always acted as if humanity was just another small player in the galaxy, was now treating Earth as a threat. It was clear that their betrayal had been only the beginning. As the transmission ended, Erin stood motionless, her mind racing. The war with the Zorath had been brutal, but now the threat from the Galactic Council was something far more insidious. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their very right to exist as an independent force in the galaxy. "We need to make a decision," General Cole said, his voice low. "The Council will be here soon. We've already lost too much, but if we fight them, we risk everything. Do we stand our ground, or do we submit?" Erin's eyes narrowed as she thought about the future. The Zorath were a deadly enemy, but they had been defeated, at least for now. The Council, on the other hand, was something much more dangerous. They held the power to make or break entire civilizations. They controlled the fate of countless species across the galaxy. "Gather the senior officers," Erin said, her voice steady. "We need to discuss our next move. Earth has been betrayed by the Council, and now we have to decide how to deal with them." In the meeting that followed, the officers of Earth's fleet were divided. Some wanted to fight back, to take on the Council head-on, but others were more cautious. They had already lost so much, and the idea of taking on an intergalactic power with unknown resources was terrifying. "There's no way we can defeat the Galactic Council," one officer argued. "Their forces are too strong, and their influence too widespread. We can't fight a war on two fronts." "We fought the Zorath and survived," another officer replied. "We can't let the Council control us. We've earned our place in the galaxy, and we're not going to let them take it away." The debate raged on for hours, with no clear solution in sight. Erin watched silently, her mind working through the possibilities. The Council's reinforcements would arrive soon, and once they did, Earth's fate would be sealed. There was no room for hesitation. Finally, Erin stood, silencing the room. "We will fight," she said, her voice resolute. "We've made our stand against the Zorath. Now we make our stand against the Council. We fight for our right to exist." As the meeting ended, Erin couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision they had just made. They were about to face a power unlike anything they had ever encountered. The Zorath had been brutal, but the Galactic Council was something far more dangerous. Erin knew that this fight would determine the future of humanity, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. The fleet began to prepare for the coming confrontation. Their ships were battered, their crews weary, but there was a fire in their hearts. The battle had only just begun. As the Earth fleet set course for the unknown forces of the Galactic Council, the stakes had never been higher. The Zorath were no longer their primary concern. Now, humanity's future would be decided by the Council's actions, and the fleet had only one choice: to fight, or to be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's most powerful force. Erin's blood ran cold. This was the last thing she had expected. The Galactic Council, which had always acted as if humanity was just another small player in the galaxy, was now treating Earth as a threat. It was clear that their betrayal had been only the beginning. As the transmission ended, Erin stood motionless, her mind racing. The war with the Zorath had been brutal, but now the threat from the Galactic Council was something far more insidious. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their very right to exist as an independent force in the galaxy. "We need to make a decision," General Cole said, his voice low. "The Council will be here soon. We've already lost too much, but if we fight them, we risk everything. Do we stand our ground, or do we submit?" Erin's eyes narrowed as she thought about the future. The Zorath were a deadly enemy, but they had been defeated, at least for now. The Council, on the other hand, was something much more dangerous. They held the power to make or break entire civilizations. They controlled the fate of countless species across the galaxy. "Gather the senior officers," Erin said, her voice steady. We need to discuss our next move. Earth has been betrayed by the Council, and now we have to decide how to deal with them. In the meeting that followed, the officers of Earth's fleet were divided. Some wanted to fight back, to take on the Council head-on, but others were more cautious. They had already lost so much, and the idea of taking on an intergalactic power with unknown resources was terrifying. There's no way we can defeat the Galactic Council, one officer argued. Their forces are too strong, and their influence too widespread. We can't fight a war on two fronts. We fought the Zoreth and survived, another officer replied. We can't let the Council control us. We've earned our place in the galaxy, and we're not going to let them take it away. The debate raged on for hours, with no clear solution in sight. Erin watched silently, her mind working through the possibilities. The Council's reinforcements would arrive soon, and once they did, Earth's fate would be sealed. There was no room for hesitation. Finally, Erin stood, silencing the room. We will fight, she said, her voice resolute. We've made our stand against the Zoreth. Now we make our stand against the Council. We fight for our right to exist. As the meeting ended, Erin couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision they had just made. They were about to face a power unlike anything they had ever encountered. The Zoreth had been brutal, but the Galactic Council was something far more dangerous. Erin knew that this fight would determine the future of humanity, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. The fleet began to prepare for the coming confrontation. Their ships were battered, their crews weary, but there was a fire in their hearts. The battle had only just begun. As the Earth fleet set course for the unknown forces of the Galactic Council, the stakes had never been higher. The Zoreth were no longer their primary concern. Now, humanity's future would be decided by the Council's actions, and the fleet had only one choice: to fight, or to be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's most powerful force. The dawn of humanity's rebellion. The Earth fleet had been through hell. The battle against the Zoreth had been brutal, leaving scars on every ship, every crew member, and on the very heart of humanity itself. But the news from the Galactic Council had shifted the war's direction entirely. No longer were they merely defending their survival. They were fighting for their very independence, their right to exist without the Council's chains. The Earth fleet was now preparing for its most dangerous mission yet. After the Council's betrayal, they had no choice but to take a stand. Their ships were damaged, their resources stretched thin, and their morale was low. But they had one advantage. They had fought together before, and they had the will to survive. That would be enough to face whatever the Council threw their way. Erin Vale stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring out at the stars. Behind her, officers were preparing the fleet for their confrontation with the Galactic Council's reinforcements. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew that this wouldn't just be another battle. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. Admiral, all ships are ready. General Cole's voice broke through the silence. Erin nodded, her mind still reeling from the weight of the decision. We're going to war against the most powerful force in the galaxy, but I want every ship to remember one thing. We fight for our future. We fight for humanity's right to choose our own path. As the fleet moved into position, Erin's thoughts turned to the one thing that terrified her the most: the unknown. The Galactic Council had vast resources, powerful fleets, and technologies that Earth could only dream of. They had manipulated galactic politics for centuries. But Erin knew that their greatest strength was not their technology, it was their unity. And that was something Earth had, something that had always made them different. We're not just soldiers, we're humanity's last hope, Erin muttered to herself, more determined than ever. And we will not bow. The first signs of the Galactic Council's fleet appeared on the sensors. They were massive, hundreds of ships, each one more advanced than anything Earth had ever faced. The Council was not taking chances. They had sent their most elite forces to crush the rebellion before it could grow. They're here, General Cole reported, his voice tight with urgency. Erin's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, the reality was far more intimidating than she had imagined. The Council's fleet was an overwhelming force, and yet Earth had to face them head-on. There would be no retreat. There would be no surrender. It was a fight to the bitter end. The battle began in an instant. The Earth fleet fired their weapons first, striking with everything they had, hoping to catch the Council's forces off guard. The first wave of missiles tore through the darkness of space, hitting their targets with pinpoint precision. The enemy's shields flared and crackled, but they held. The Council was ready. "Captain, we've got incoming fire," one of Erin's officers shouted. "Braced for impact." The flagship shuddered as enemy fire rocked the ship. Erin steadied herself, her mind focused on the task ahead. The Earth fleet wasn't backing down. They couldn't. Not now. "Hold the line," she commanded, her voice steady but fierce. "We need to give the fighters a chance to break through." The battle around them intensified as smaller ships from Earth's fleet engaged the Council's fighters in a deadly dogfight. The stars outside the window became streaks of light as explosions and laser beams cut through space. It was chaos. But amid the violence, there was something else, a feeling of unity. Earth's fleet was not just a group of soldiers anymore. They were a force bound by something much stronger than fear or desperation. They were fighting for their freedom. As the battle raged on, Erin watched as the Earth fleet pushed forward, slowly gaining ground. The Council's forces were formidable, but they were not invincible. Humanity's fleet, despite its losses, was relentless. They fought with a determination the Council had not anticipated. "This is it," Erin said to herself. "We will not let them take our future." The Earth fleet launched wave after wave of attacks, chipping away at the Council's defenses. Each strike was a testament to their will to survive, to fight for what was rightfully theirs. And slowly, ever so slowly, the Council's fleet began to falter. Their shields flickered, their ships were damaged, and their formations started to break apart. The impossible was happening. Earth was winning. As the battle reached its climax, a massive explosion shook the battlefield. The Zorath dreadnought, which had been among the most dangerous of the Council's reinforcements, was hit by a final devastating strike from the flagship's main cannon. The ship exploded into a brilliant display of fire and debris, marking the turning point in the battle. The Council's forces were no longer invincible. "We did it," General Cole shouted. "We've broken their lines." Erin allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew the war was not yet over. The Galactic Council would not give up so easily. They would regroup. They would retaliate. But today, humanity had shown them something the Council never expected. Humanity's spirit, its unwillingness to be controlled, its desire to carve its own path in the stars. The Earth fleet pulled back, but not in defeat. They had held their ground, and now they had earned something far more important than victory: respect. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. They had betrayed Earth, and now they had learned that humanity could not, and would not, be broken. As Erin watched the remaining Council ships retreat, she knew that this was only the beginning. But for the first time, humanity stood not as a pawn in a galactic game, but as a force to be reckoned with. And that, Erin knew, was only the first step towards securing their place in the galaxy.